Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So this is our first lunchtime session of our AAT festival this week that we're putting on with a variety of different sessions covering some technical stuff, some skills, and some more career-orientated stuff, hopefully just to support, to motivate, to inspire AAT studiers. We know that the last, blimey, 4.5, going on to 5 months now, we know it's been quite challenging during lockdown for students, particularly where sometimes colleges have been unable to continue with delivery. So we're hoping that this conference this week will be a good opportunity to gather people together, give them a little bit of support, a little bit of motivation, incentive to now crack on and get some assessments sat. I know there was a big lull when the assessments were suspended, but we're now through that and assessment venues are now back up and running. I know the AAT, they've had over 30,000 assessments sat since they reopened at the end of June. So clearly there was a well of students ready to sit their assessments. Now, to start us off today, I'm actually going to have a little bit of a talk from my own perspective, just about motivation. I've been training AAT students for well over 20 years now, nearly 25 years. And in that time, I think often that, well, anything in life, it's not about ability. Ability, is useful, and we see students who are obviously very smart, very capable, but they're not always the ones that do the best either in their assessments or in their careers. I think ability, only goes so far, but it's motivation. It's kind of more the attitude that is actually far more important. Look at what I've achieved in my own career, and that I can tell you is not because I'm particularly brilliant or particularly intelligent. It's just because I'm very, very highly motivated, and I'm very good at motivating myself to achieve things that I want to. So I was going to talk through, and actually I've got a little presentation that I just thought I'd use to guide some thoughts here. So hopefully you can all see that coming up on the screen now. So you've got my contact details there. You're more than welcome. Take my email address, garethjohn@fi.co.uk. Always happy to receive emails from studiers, questions or comments, anything they might find interesting for me to hear about. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, so please feel free if you want to find me on LinkedIn, you can link with me. I tend to fill my LinkedIn feed with all sorts of exciting stuff about both AAT and other more broad accountancy training. But I did want to talk a little bit about motivation. I'm present on quite a few sort of online forums, Facebook groups and the like. In fact, we're going to be joined at 1 o'clock by an admin from one of the biggest Facebook AAT Distance Learning groups. And so one of the things I often see on these groups, I like to sort of see what students are kind of talking about from time to time. And something I often see is the idea of students who will say, I've got no motivation, I need somebody to give me a kick up the backside. Often I'll see this on a Saturday morning, perhaps students who are, fresh from a busy week at work, thinking that they're going to do some studies and looking for somebody to actually give them that motivation. Now, I personally am a big believer that nobody else can give you motivation. You can't get motivation from other people, I personally don't think. What you can get from other people is what's called accountability. So I just want to start by talking just briefly about the difference between motivation and accountability. And particularly in terms of that phrase I so often see, I've got no motivation, I need somebody to give me a kick up the backside. That's almost asking somebody to give you motivation. I think that's very difficult. I think the other people can give you accountability. I personally think accountability comes from other people. So it's, I think, very useful when you're doing studies, when you're doing anything in life, if you're trying to achieve something, is to have other people that will hold you accountable. They're the people that will come along and say to you, well, have you done this thing you said you were going to do? Have you achieved this target that you set for yourself? But I personally think that motivation has got to come from inside yourself. Nobody else can give you the motivation. Somebody can come and check up on whether you're doing your studies. Somebody can check up on whether you've sat an assessment. But I don't think somebody else can give you the motivation to actually do it. I think that's got to come from within yourself, because ultimately the reason you are doing your exams, the reason you are trying to achieve the qualification, has got to be very personal to yourself in terms of what you are going to get out of it. And in fact, I thought, it might even be worth us asking ourselves, doing these assessments, doing these exams, why is it you want to do this? What does it actually mean to you? So in fact, if I just stop sharing my screen quickly there, you've got the chat box, and I'm not asking for anything overly personal here. I went through this journey myself of studying to pass exams to get a qualification. I'd be very interested if any of you are willing to drop into the chat box the reasons why you're doing all of this. Why are you putting yourself through this hard work and these exams and this qualification? What's it going to mean to you? Any ideas? Got any thoughts? Drop into the chat box there, any of you? Nobody said it was going to be audience participation, did they? Improved confidence there, great one from Sarah. Better job and better life. And actually, I think the two sort of go hand in hand. You could say that passing exams, getting your qualification will help you progress in your work. I think realistically, in this day and age, in accounting and finance, you need a qualification to get beyond a certain level. You need some letters after your name. You need to have done some exams. But I think personally that progression in your career naturally is going to hopefully mean a progression in your own life. Work and life do go so hand in hand. Jessica there saying, proving what you know, that can be a very good thing. Actually, a lot of students, they may have worked in accounts for many years, and actually the qualification is really just going to give almost a recognition of what it is that they can actually do. Improving, there's a lot of talk here about improving understanding. What about your life? What would qualifying AAT actually do to your life? Because hopefully it's going to give you a better career prospects, better job, perhaps better earning power. I look at my own life. There's very little that I currently have in my life. I run my own business now. I live in a nice house. I have 2 children. Very little of that would have been possible without the qualification I achieved. And actually, perhaps more than that, there's a great comment there from Sarah again about working in an area you feel passionate about. My qualification actually ultimately has given me the ability to do something I absolutely love. There's no way I could do the job I do if I hadn't, qualified years and years ago, obviously, as an accountant. Those letters after my name, which basically opened the doors into the career I now have, which I absolutely love. So I think, we won't overdo that exercise. Obviously, for each one of you, I suspect there's a quite different, quite personal reason for why you're ultimately doing the qualification, why you're doing all this hard work, why you're doing the exams. I think it's worth you formulating that, actually write it down. Remember when I was a student, because being a student can be quite stressful, can be quite hard work. There'll be times when you think, why am I doing this? What is the point? None of my friends are doing all of this hard work. And I used to go back to, I had it actually up on my wall in my bedroom when I was a student, almost like a little paragraph of what it was I hoped that the qualification was going to do for me. Almost going back to, what is it ultimately? What's the end game? What's the objective of doing that? So if I now go back to my presentation here. So, worth actually making sure you're clear in your own head what it is you're trying to achieve. Get that motivation from inside yourself that you can return to whenever the motivation starts lacking. Other people, I do think it's worth getting other people on board, whether it's friends, family, people who are on groups with you, but they're only giving you the accountability. They're only going to actually chase you up to see, are you actually trying to achieve the thing you wanted to achieve? Now, I thought I'd take you through, there's a few kind of classic excuses that I hear from students time after time after time, and I'll be interested if any of you sometimes tell yourselves and other people these things. So for instance, when I say to a student, have you sat your exam, have you sat your assessment that you've been studying for, one of the classic things I hear from them is, I need to do more work. They feel like if they spend another few weeks working towards that subject, hopefully they'll get a better mark, they'll get a better chance of passing. Now, obviously, if you've only been studying a subject for 1 week or 2 weeks, then the chances are you won't have covered the whole syllabus, you won't have done enough question practice. So yes, perhaps at that stage, you will need to do more work. But I had a student recently who, they said that to me, I need to do more work. They'd been studying the same paper, the same subject for 18 months. They still thought they needed to do more work. Now, to me, they were just putting off the assessment. They were just making excuses for not getting around to actually sitting them. So if they've been studying the paper for 18 months, they don't really need to do more work. They should have done plenty of work at that point. And I think there's a real danger, the longer you study a paper for, you know, particularly if you go beyond, I think a good rule of thumb is one paper I would maybe give 8 weeks as a rough rule of thumb for. You know, it might be achievable in 6, might take you 10, but give yourself about 8 weeks to sit a paper. Once you go beyond that, I think you're probably starting to forget more than you are learning. So once you get to your 4th, 5th, 6th month of studying a paper, I think you're probably starting to forget more than you've actually learned. So don't fall into the trap of thinking you need to do lots more work, particularly once you're a couple of months into studying a paper. Another excuse I find students constantly telling themselves, I don't feel ready. I don't feel ready to sit my exam, to sit my assessment. Now, I think back to when I was a student, and actually, how often did I feel ready for any of the exams I sat? Well, I can tell you now, I never, ever felt ready for the exams that I was sitting. Never, not once. And in fact, the nature of these exams is you're never going to feel 100% ready. But the thing to bear in mind is you do not need to feel 100% ready in order to pass an assessment, in order to pass an exam. You only need to know enough of the syllabus to get through. And what you should be doing is, you know, once you've been studying a paper for say 6 weeks, hopefully at that stage, you're starting to do lots of question practice. Hopefully you're starting to do mock exams, for instance. And at that stage, use the mock exams to tell you whether you're ready. So use the tasks that you're seeing in the mocks to identify whether you're ready to sit the exam. So I don't feel ready is another classic one. And sort of linked to that, and this is absolutely the bane of my life. I actually absolutely hate hearing this phrase. I will book the assessment when I feel ready. Well, firstly, there's a danger you never, ever, ever feel ready, as we were just talking about. And I've come across students who, again, they spend months and months, sometimes as much as a year or more, not quite feeling ready to sit an assessment, so never actually booking it. I'm a big believer in book your assessment early on. So as soon as you start studying for a new exam, in the first week or two, book the assessment. Give yourself that 8 to 10 weeks, but book the assessment. Because I think having that target, I think having that date in your diary is far more likely to motivate you than if you just think, well, I'll book it when I feel ready. And you drift week after week and you never feel ready, so you never book it, but that means you never feel ready. And you end up in this perpetual sort of limbo of constantly delaying and deferring. I think it makes sense. Get your exam booked in. You're probably aware, obviously, the AAT exams, most of them are on demand, so you can sit them whenever you want, which sounds great, you know, and it's good for flexibility. Obviously, you don't have to sit them on any particular day, but actually, I think that flexibility can potentially be a bit of a curse. You know, I remember back a few years when the AAT exams, they were held every June and every December, which actually was great because there was 1 week in June, 1 week in December when you could sit your exams. So even if students didn't feel completely ready, well, they still sat because they didn't want to have to wait 6 months. I think the potential danger with these on-demand exams is you keep pushing off and delaying and deferring because it's possible. So my advice is get a date booked in the diary because you can potentially change them. You know, up until a few days before the exam. If you really need to, you can probably shift the date. But I think having that line in the sand, having a date in the diary, far more likely to motivate you to study towards the exams. And then final excuse, the final classic I constantly hear from students about whether or not they should sit their exams. I'm scared that I might fail. Now, this, I think, personally, is a bit of a failing in our own educational system through our kind of schools and colleges. I'm sure you'd all agree that you are brought up, you know, by teachers, by schools, by colleges, by your parents even. You're brought up to think that passing, to think that success is a good thing. It's good to pass exams and it's a bad thing to fail exams. The thing you start to understand as you go on in your life and in your career is actually failing isn't necessarily such a bad thing. You know, failing, I personally think, is a natural part of progressing in anything in life. And I'm not just talking about exams. You know, I'm talking about what you may be doing in your own career. I'm talking about if you're, you know, I don't know, trying to learn a language or trying to learn. I've spent a lot of time over the last few years trying to learn how to ride horses so that I can ride with my daughters. Now, I have failed an awful lot more than I have succeeded in that pursuit, but it's the failure that really teaches you the lessons. Actually, if I come away from this, and I'm interested again to go back to the chat box, because this fear of failure, and I can talk forever about the fear of failure, I personally think it's the biggest thing that holds people back in their lives. The fear of failure, you know, whether it's exams or going for that promotion where you don't really know what the job might entail, moving to another part of the country, you know, taking up a new hobby, you know, even asking somebody out on a date. You know, it's the fear of failure that holds people back. And I can tell you there is nothing in my life that I value that I didn't totally mess up first time around. You know, so I've had to get very used to failing and actually recognizing that failure is a natural part of success and a natural part of progression. So actually, can I ask those of you on the call, firstly, if you failed an exam, what's bad about that? What's bad about failing an exam? Put in the chat box, perhaps. What's bad about failing an exam? Why is that so terrifying? Right, somebody's just put in there. So Sarah, you're saying other people will judge you. Okay, who will judge you for failing an exam? Because I often get that. I often get people saying, oh, other people will think worse of me if I fail an exam. And when I pin them down and say, well, tell me who? Well, your colleagues think worse of you. And they say, well, no, actually, they think it's quite good that I'm doing the exams in the first place. Will your family think worse of you for failing an exam? Well, again, no, actually, they're quite proud of me doing my AAT qualification. You know, so, you know, and you know, I think that idea that people will judge you, often it's actually more about you judging yourself if you fail an exam. I don't think other people generally will judge you. You've got to bear in mind, AAT is a globally recognized, very, very high level qualification for bookkeepers and accountants. You know, it's not easy. Lots of people fail. There's a few comments about resits. Expensive to do resits? Yep, absolutely. Obviously, if you fail an exam, you've got to pay for a resit. You know, I don't know what, it depends where you sit your exam. So it might be, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 pounds to resit an exam. Absolutely. But actually, if you don't sit an exam for months and months and months, can you imagine you're perhaps missing out on promotions? You're perhaps missing out on moving forward in your career. You know, which is the bigger cost ultimately to not, you know, my view is to sit an exam and fail it, and therefore maybe have to pay for a resit, is actually infinitely preferable to not sitting it at all. You know, think of that student I mentioned who was studying the same subject for 18 months. So it was 18 months, she hadn't made any progress, hadn't been promoted, hadn't got any bonuses for passing exams, hadn't been able to move on to the next level. Yeah. Now, how much did that cost her versus the potential 70 or 80 pounds if she did have to resit the exam? So I personally would view the cost of resitting an exam, and you know, I know it is a cost, but in the grand scheme of things, in terms of your career and your progression, I think it's, you know, it's a cost that's well worth, you know, potentially suffering. And after all, you don't know if you're going to have to resit until you've actually sat the exam in the first place. So I'm a big believer, you know, sitting an exam and failing it is far, far better than not sitting it at all. Again, you know, I see a few comments around, you know, people judging you if you fail exams. I'm just not sure if that's necessarily the case. And after all, if people judge you for failing these challenging exams, are they worth worrying about? Is their opinion all that important? So, you know, certainly the important people in my own career have never judged me when I've messed things up. In fact, they've actually respected me for having a go in the first place. So this is what I'm trying to get to the root of, is often people fear failure for reasons that aren't real, really. You know, they aren't actually that big a deal. So if I go back to my little presentation now. So I want to talk a little bit about failure because it's a big sort of beef of mine. Failing, you know, people think that not passing an exam is failing. It's not at all. And don't misunderstand failing for you being a failure. That's not the same thing at all. Failing doesn't make you a failure. In my view, missing a target is not failing, whether that's trying to pass an exam or, I did a show jumping competition a few months ago with my daughters, trying to get round in one go without knocking any fences over. I ploughed through every fence and I fell off the horse once. Did I view myself as a failure? No, because I had a go. So in my view in life, having the target, so having the qualification you're trying to achieve, having the exams you're trying to pass, whatever it might be, learning a language, learning a musical instrument, it's actually having the target and pursuing the target. That's what matters in life. It's not whether you actually hit your targets. To me, true failure is either not trying in the first place because you are, scared of failure and you're worried about what other people might think of you, which actually they're probably not that interested really. So not trying in the first place, or giving up when, and I say when rather than if, failure actually arrives. If you try to achieve anything meaningful in your life, you will fail from time to time, absolutely guaranteed. Everybody does. The only people who never fail are the people who never try. And my view is that's much worse in life. If you're never trying, I'm sure some of you will have heard of the concept of a comfort zone. When you're in a comfort zone, when you're not trying anything different, you're not pushing yourself, you're not challenging yourself, feels kind of all right and relaxing. But I can tell you anything, to sit in a comfort zone for 20 years, you are wasting the potential of yourself and your life and your career. In fact, the thing, I love this little diagram I came across on the internet a few years ago, because most people think failure is a kind of binary, mutually exclusive outcome where either you succeed, so maybe pass an exam, or you fail and it's game over and it's just all gone wrong. In reality, what you understand as you go through your career, when you achieve a certain level of success, what you come to recognize is success is only possible by visiting those different failures along the way. I've actually had to reprogram my brain to think about failure in a very different way to when I was in my early 20s. I love failure. I celebrate failure because every time I fail, I know I'm a step closer to success. And in fact, let's go back to the chat box briefly. What's good about failure? Come on, put it in the chat box. What's good about failure in life? Why is failure a positive thing? What ideas have people got for why failure is actually a very good thing to experience? Because I've trained myself to learn. Yeah, biggest lessons learned, absolutely. Yeah, you learn more. You actually learn way more by failing than by succeeding. Way, way more. Reality check, I love that, Ali. Yeah, failure actually keeps you humble. And it actually makes you appreciate the success more, I think, when you fail from time to time. Yeah, identify your own weaknesses and strengths. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's through failing multiple times over the years that I've learned what it is I'm really, really good at, which is now what I focus on. And then I get other colleagues involved in areas that I'm not so good at, which actually means that, the business as a whole becomes stronger. So, somebody once said to me, failure is the condiment that makes success taste so sweet, which I think is really, really true. If everything in life was rosy and great, it wouldn't actually feel rosy and great. It only feels great because you've known what it's like to fail. And actually, I sort of celebrate and love the failure as much as the success now. And I'll just go back to my presentation for one more slide, actually, because there was another one I came across. A lot of people, particularly early on in their careers, they mistakenly think that progress is going to be linear and predictable and you just get better and better and better every single time. It's not true at all. And I'm sure all of you will have experienced this. If you have, I experienced this when I was learning to ride horses. Some weeks I would seem to be going forward and making progress. The following week, I seemed to have gone back 6 months and didn't know what I was doing. I'd fall off the horse. So actually, in reality, success doesn't grow in a linear fashion. It does stop and plateau and then drop back down again. And sometimes you suffer reversals, but it's the reversals that then allow you to leap forward. And actually, this is why I've come in my own career and my own life more generally. I've come to really celebrate when things start going horribly wrong, because I know it's just part of the journey. It's actually just part of what's going to lead to the ultimate success. And I'm a big believer, do reward yourself for success. So if you do pass an assessment, great, take yourself out for a nice dinner with your partner or something, buy yourself a nice treat. But equally, reward yourself for failure too, because failing means at least you're in the game. And you can imagine if you don't allow yourself the chance of experiencing failure, you actually can't allow yourself the chance to experience success. So what I mean by this idea of, to sit an exam and fail it, well, at least you gave yourself the chance to pass it, and you will have learned from the process of failing it. That's far better than going 18 months without sitting an exam in the first place. So make sure you reward yourself when you fail as well. I'm a big believer in that. If I fail at something, I open just as nice a bottle of wine as when I succeed at stuff. And it's actually really changed my own view on what failure means. Well, that's my little rambling. So I hope that's been of some use and some thought-provoking for those of you. We're now bang on 1 o'clock. I can see that I have been joined by my colleague Nick, who's now going to pick up for a little discussion, particularly around studying remotely, because whether students are on classroom courses or distance learning or live programs, we're all at home now and have been for the last 4 or 5 months and potentially are for the coming months. So Nick is going to have a little panel chat with Han and Jamie, but I'll let them introduce themselves. So over to you, Nick.
Brilliant. Well, everyone. My name is Nick Craggs. For those who don't know me, I am AAT Distance Learning Director at First Intuition. I have been for 6 years now, nearly. I've been at First Intuition. And obviously, I'm a big fan of distance learning. But obviously, as Gareth mentioned, in recent events, everyone is studying at home. And I've always said that even if you were studying in a classroom, you still have to put some work in once you are at home. You can't just walk into a classroom and you will have all the knowledge that you need without putting that into practice. So I've been joined by a couple of distance learning experts and what we're going to do is sort of talk about the things to consider about distance learning, and we're going to talk about things, study tips and things that they have learned with regards to their studies that hopefully you will find useful when studying either with a virtual classroom or a distance learning course, or even study tips when things do go back to normal and you're studying within the classroom. So in no particular order, I'd like to introduce Jamie from AAT. Jamie, do you want to tell us what your role is at AAT?
Yeah, so my role is Distance Learning Account Manager. So it's essentially helping our online and distance learning providers with all things AAT really, and just really working together to look at how we can best support our students with their studies.
Lovely. And then I'm also joined by a good friend of mine, Han. Now, Han runs an AAT Distance Learning Facebook page, don't you?
It's a massive group. We now have around 17,000 members. So that takes quite a lot of moderation. But it's a really, really supportive environment. I myself am still a student. I've been studying AAT since 2016. I did my first 2 levels, level 2 and 3 at college, but for level 4, I was unable to afford it myself. So I've gone down the self-studying route. It's been a bit of a different way of learning. So I've had to think about things in quite a different way, which is interesting. But of course, being part of the Facebook group has enabled me to pick up a lot of tips from the pros that have been there for years before me.
Yeah, and you were admin of that group before you started studying distance learning, weren't you?
Say that again, sorry? You
were admin of that group before you started distance learning, were you?
I think, yeah. I think I found it in 2017. A friend of mine in Bristol, actually, she was doing the AAT, and she recommended the Facebook group to me. So, yeah. Can't believe that's coming up for 3 years. Wow.
Yeah, time flies, doesn't it? Yes, obviously the sort of main aim of this session was geared towards distance learning. So we would sort of aim it towards people who are considering distance learning and those who are currently studying distance learning. So Jamie, what would you say are the main advantages of studying via distance learning?
I'd say one of the main ones would be flexibility. So if you've got a busy lifestyle, definitely you pretty much study where you want and when you want. You've also got the benefit of studying at your own pace. Because often if you're studying in a classroom, you're studying at the same pace as that group of students that you're studying with. Whereas we found that people who are studying through distance learning can often get it done a lot quicker if they choose to do so. They're not kind of restricted by those typical enrolment dates and start dates. And yeah, you can enroll whenever you want as well. So you've not got to stick to those typical enrolment start dates of like September and January. And it does, as Han mentioned, it tends to be a lot more affordable. So when you speak to training providers, you can often ask the question, are there any payment plans available? There often are. And it does vary quite significantly, but generally it is a cheaper option than classroom. And yeah, we get students that are studying all around the world, and that's the benefit of it, obviously, is that you're studying remotely.
Yeah, I mean, as anyone who knows me, they know I'm a massive, massive fan of AAT. And if it's up to me, everyone would study AAT. It should be GCSE, you know, every teacher at school. And I would like as many people as possible. And what I really like about distance learning, it allows those people who couldn't possibly attend a college for whether it's work commitments or family commitments or the, you know, health issues even, it allows them to get the very real benefits of AAT that they otherwise wouldn't possibly be able to get. So I know we have some students who've taken a little longer than perhaps they would in a college, and like you say, we had one student who did level 2, 3 and 4 in 5 months, which is crazy. And that's obviously not the norm, but you do have that flexibility. However, obviously they're the great benefits of distance learning. What would you consider before you start studying via distance learning, Jamie?
Well, with distance learning, you've definitely got to have commitment and be focused 100%. And it's all about kind of setting your own goals and your own timetable. And you will find with some training providers, they can support you with putting a bit of a timetable together, and then you can amend it depending on your commitments. But you do have to be very self-disciplined, definitely. And another thing you would want to ask training providers when you are shopping around is, what level of tutor support do I get? So you might need support on weekdays, or you might want to ask about weekends, evenings as well. It's really down to you whether you want one-on-one support all the time. And also looking at whether training providers have student forums where you can discuss your studies with other students as well. And also kind of what resources do you want? So do you want some physical resources as well as online resources? Because that's also available with some training providers. So yeah, it's just considering how you want to study and asking those questions to the training providers.
That's right. And it's not just, you know, compare one training provider to another. Even with at First Intuition, we have various different online courses. So we have online live, which for those who want that college structure, I'll start here, I'll finish there. And then with the pre-recorded one, lectures where you can go as fast as slow, even to our self-study courses and our mock banks, where they don't get tutor support, but they just get the materials, and some people are fine with that. Han, how did you go from college to, as Jamie says, going to distance learning, and then you had to find structure and motivation with your studies?
It was quite a challenge to start off with. It was very disappointing to me that I couldn't continue at college because the tutors there were absolutely fantastic. The big thing that made a real difference was, I think, for me at any rate, finding a job that would fit in around college. And when I first started AAT, I was very fortunate. I was doing a maternity cover role. So when that came to an end and I was looking for somewhere else, I was really quite surprised the amount of accounting firms and companies that weren't interested in me because they couldn't get that 5-day a week out of me, even though one of the days was directly benefiting them because I was funding myself to go to college. So when that came to an end, I had a little bit of work last year as self-employed, and then I was able to find another job in October, and they funded me to start the level 4, and I'd sort of dabbled a little bit, but then without the job, it was very hard to stay focused. And I just couldn't see the point. You know, what's the point of studying if I can't get the job in it? So now my focus has been really renewed from having the job. It's the guys that I work in a practice, and the guys are really supportive and very encouraging of people to do their AAT. So I feel like I've got somebody kind of over my shoulder just going, come on, you've got to keep going. Where I think without that, when I was self-employed, it was just easy just to be whatever, you know, oh, there's always tomorrow. So you do have to find some kind of stick as much as a carrot. And not saying my guys at work sort of run around with a stick, oh, you've got to do it. They're very flexible. But for me, it's helped having an external person who's just keeping me going. And certainly from your company's point of view, you know, I'm now doing my level 4 with First Intuition. I do get quite a lot of regular little emails. Hey, how's it going? You know, is there anything? I haven't seen you do anything for a while. Is everything okay? And I really appreciate that. So
I see you get a few bits of fan mail in the comments, Han. Yeah. So obviously, one of the great advantages.
Sorry, I thought I might just chip in there actually, because at that point that Han was just making, you know, it's that whole thing about accountability of having somebody to almost keep you honest with the plans that you put into place. And I think the AAT, I was chatting to somebody there quite recently who was saying that they'd done some research and that they'd worked out that for learners who had what they described as a nagging friend, you know, that person on the shoulder, you know, that their results were 50% better than people who didn't. So, you know, it's well worth, you know, whether it's a colleague or a, you know, member of your family to get somebody on board to be that nagging friend.
Yeah, I like that.
You don't have to be a student or an accountant, just someone who will say, I've not seen you stick your nose in a book for a while. I think that's a great idea. I mean, one of the advantages of distance learning is you can take more ownership of your studies, and you can obviously decide when you're going to study, when you take breaks. But with that flexibility comes responsibility, and you've got to keep organised. What tools have you been using, Han, and what tips would you have for others?
I have I've developed various systems. It's easy for me to go overboard in planning and not actually doing. So I have a huge poster in my kitchen, and I've actually done a little mock-up here, so I hope my camera's around the right way. So I've got 2 columns for studying for home. I start off with this week, and then I've got next week, and then a future. And what I do is I put post-its up. You know, so-and-so's birthday, boom, that's in the future box, because I know that is coming along eventually. Chapter 5, that's going to go in this week's study. Chapter 6, next week's study. So I've got an overview of everything else that's going on in my life in conjunction with my studying, as well as helping me think, okay, what tools do I need? What book do I need? What pens? Where's my calculator? Is everything together? So when I sit down to study, I can just pull everything off and go.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that study planner. I must admit, when I was studying, I was one of those that spent ages doing a study planner, because that gave you more opportunity to put off the actual studying. So there's a nice balancing act. Yeah. But obviously,
I'm sorry, my own experience, because I spent years studying without a planner, and it was only in the last year or so that I was studying for my accountancy qualification that I sort of bothered to do one. And I think the reason I'd never done one was I thought it was a bit kind of, you know, it's a bit boring and a bit geeky to have a study planner, and I was cooler than that. But what I found bizarrely, because I don't know if any of you get that situation where you're constantly stressed because you know you should be studying, but you're not studying. So like every evening, you're not really enjoying yourself, but you're not really making study progress either. And what I found, the real revelation for me, was the study planner meant I could build in the times I wasn't studying as well as the times I was. And I started to enjoy my evenings of not studying because I knew I didn't need to be studying. So whether I was just sitting watching telly or, going out with some friends or, playing football or whatever, I actually enjoyed it much more because I knew it was my proper not study time. And that was the real revelation for me about a study planner.
Yeah, I think with mine, what works for me is that it's not constrictive. It's not detailing every single minute down to the last second, because life happens. You never know. Somebody might pick up the phone and say, oh, hey, I'm in town. I haven't seen you for ages. And, I only arranged to come out yesterday. And you've got to have that flexibility in your life, especially for the students with children. All kinds of things can happen in life. So for me, planning it can't be too set in stone. And that's why I don't have the actual dates on my study planner. I only have this week, next week, future, because that allows me a bit of breathing space.
Yeah, and that's one of the great advantages about AATs. The exams are on demand, and life does get in the way, as we've seen recently. And so if you aren't quite ready, you can put your exam off. And I know obviously people haven't been able to sit their exams recently, but have you seen a lot of exams sat recently, Jamie?
Yeah, definitely at the beginning as well, because people during this time were clearly studying and gearing up for when they would be switched back on. So we had quite a few people sitting exams during a short period of time, and we're still getting really healthy exam numbers coming through, but it's slowing down a little bit now. It's almost kind of back to normal like it was this time last year.
Yeah, and I think now we get a bit of decent weather, it does make it a little bit more difficult to study, but I mean that's the advantage of distance learning. You'll never miss a family barbecue again, or a sunny day. Han, if you could pick some of your top study tips specifically for distance learning, what would you suggest?
Well, definitely the organisation. Find something that works for you. Try different things. Don't be afraid to sort of mix and match till you find your match, because everybody's different. The next one I think is learning how to research, and then also is the support systems, getting support systems in place. Now, what I mean by learning how to research is you never quite know when the muse will descend upon you and you'll get a real urge to study, and then suddenly it's 11:30 at night, you have nobody around that you can say, oh my gosh, how does this work? So you need to be able to go online, have a look and find the answers that you want very, very quickly. And a lot of people, I think, don't realize just how much is out there. And certainly, like, I can say a big thumbs up for the AAT weekly emails. And if you're not receiving those, do find out how you can get hold of them, because they're absolutely brilliant and they give you all kinds of information about stuff that's coming up, revision tools, all sorts of things like that. But also knowing how to refine your search when you're looking in a search engine. So when I was doing the indirect tax exam, my mind would certainly go, I wonder what the VAT is on such and such. Now, if you just put in VAT carrots, well, that's great. You're going to get lots of responses for Australia and Canada and America. So you need to know VAT carrots HMRC or VAT carrots Europe or UK, and then you can start to really hone your research and find what you're looking for very, very quickly. On the support system side of things, that's a twofold thing. I think you need to have people outside. It could be friends, family, people you work with who you can ask questions of, or you can just sit down and have a really good vent and just, I'm just not getting this. And it's somebody who won't patronize you by saying, oh, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. That doesn't help. You want somebody to listen to you and accept your venting and help you get through that emotional moment. But I found the guys I work with, I was actually really quite sad because my number 2 boss, she's a huge wealth of knowledge, and she said, oh, if you have any questions, do ask. So I asked her, and then she said, you know, you're the first person that's ever actually taken me up on that. So if people offer you to help you, take them up on it. They don't do it for everyone, so it's a compliment. On the self-supporting side, you have to know what your limitations are and be kind to yourself to a certain extent. And I get quite frustrated, I think, when I see people succumbing to the fear of an exam or a particular topic. It doesn't do you any favors. You haven't got time to waste unless you have a genuine mental health condition. You can set things in place where you can say, no, I'm not letting this derail me. I'm sitting down to study, not to freak out. And quite often I'll suddenly sit up and I'll go, for goodness sake, Dunsterville, pull yourself together. And I have a real rant at myself. And I come on, you can do this. And that's often enough just to kind of reset my mind and get me back into the studying again. Because I refuse to let the fear kind of take control. So it's as much as being supportive of yourself as having people support you.
Yeah, and I think I really want to emphasize that the support out there now, there is so much. You've got great Facebook groups like Hans, you've got the AAT forum as well, and AAT is a great student body. You know, you should follow them on all social media, because you know, see it through Facebook and Twitter that their messages that come through. And I think distance learning sometimes has these sort of negative connotations. The word distance puts people off. And I think back to the old correspondence courses of 10, 15 years ago, where you put your assignment in the post and you got it back 3 weeks later with a biro scribbled all over. And I think recent events, people have seen, you know, the options available with online, with Zoom and lectures and things like that. And I think it has opened people's perceptions as the support you can get with distance learning. I mean, have you seen a lot more demand within inquiries, Jamie, about distance learning?
A lot more demand. I mean, to be honest, prior to everything, distance learning was growing anyway. But we've found since everything going on kind of post-March, over 70% of our prospective students are interested in distance learning. And I think it's exactly as you say, Nick. I think we've all been pushed outside of our comfort zone in one way or another. And I think for some people who distance learning wouldn't have been an option, now probably is, because you're thinking, hang on, if I can work from home, surely I can study from home. And there is definitely a lot more support than people tend to think there is. And in fact, in some cases online, you've kind of got a bit more support because you can talk to a tutor round the clock. You've also got the student forums as well. So it's definitely a positive move in the right direction, 100%.
Yeah, and we are seeing a lot more people who are not, it's not very sort of black and white, where I'm a distance learning student or I'm a classroom student. And within First Intuition, we have students who will just pick and mix. They'll do some units online, some units in the classroom. And I think Gareth will back me up that they don't see that, you know, they get less support with distance learning than they do in the classroom. It's just what works for them at that period of time. And some units especially work better with online than classroom.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you go back, you know, 10 years, most students would either do absolutely everything in the classroom, and I was a bit like that as a student, or they would do absolutely everything remotely, distance learning. And that's so much less common these days. You know, you do still get students who will be quite loyal to one or the other, but we see far more students who just view distance learning as another way of achieving a certain paper to doing a classroom course, or they might look at a live online program rather than one that's pre-recorded lectures, or if it's an easy unit, they might just pick up some textbooks, and for the harder units, they might look for a revision course. So it's very much a kind of, you know, mix and match approach of the different ways you know, and if they're busy at work one quarter, they might think, well, I'll do more distance learning for that 3 months of the year because I can't get into college, but then following that, I'll then do a course that I go into the physical classroom environment, obviously in normal circumstances. So yeah, students are much more willing to, and I think they expect the same level of support and the same level of kind of materials and resources, no matter how they're choosing to study, which, you know, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of support resources as well, so AAT recently launched our learning portal. So whether you're studying in a classroom or online, that's just another way to gain resources. So we have podcasts and webinars, and you can build your own goals on there, and you can drag resources from third parties as well. So we've got that. And as Han mentioned as well, AAT Weekly, if you're a student. And also, if you are considering studying AAT, then we've got a student advisor team. So I can pop all the details in the chat link later. But feel free to give us a call, and we can help advise you on kind of where to start and what path to take, etc.
I can see some comments actually in the chat box. A couple from Sarah and Sheena just around FE colleges' ability to react to COVID. So I suspect students will be far more interested going forward in the providers that can offer the different approaches to supporting students, so that if there are, you know, either local lockdowns or, you know, who knows, the more general, you know, reintroduction of lockdown measures, that you're going to have providers that can sort of carry on through that process. It's just, you know, it's just such an uncertain time at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, we have been running free revision sessions for not just our students, but other students, and they're free and open to everyone. And what I've really liked is I've had a lot of students who've joined them who would never consider distance learning or studying online, and they've joined it and they thought, this is really good. Actually, you get to speak to a tutor in real time in the comfort of your own home, without the cost of travel or childcare. Sheena being one, and Sarah says it's been brilliant. So yeah, if you are, you know, studying in classroom and you want to see what online's like, I put the link in the chat, and that's we've committed to running them until the end of the year. Han, do you have one last golden nugget of information or a tip that you've come across since you've made that transition from classroom to online?
I think I've pretty much summed it all up, but support is out there for whatever issue you're going through, whether it's a major family event or juggling childcare and studying, whether you're working and trying to fit it in around a full-time job or even 2 jobs or more. Support is out there, and if you're not a fan of social media, then there are all sorts of other options like the AAT forum. You know, there is stuff out there, and get yourself supported by other people who know what it's like. It's really, it's actually quite life affirming to know that you're not going mad and other people feel it too. And yeah, we're all in this together and we're all pulling forward, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that is a very important point, because as much as my distance learning team, you know, with there will help you, you know, check you're okay, answer any technical queries, sometimes you need just have a chat to another person who's going through exactly the same thing as you, who, you know, have got the exam tomorrow and I'm panicking, I'm stressed, or, you know, the elation of coming out of the exam. And you know, there's so many, like the AT forum, Hans group is great, just to be able to get that almost pastoral support, rather than just, you know, this is how you do all accruals and prepayments, and just rant about variances, or, you know, just go speak to the same people going through the same things as yourself.
You're always picking on variances, Nick. Variances are great.
I'm sure
variance is really easy. I like variances. Can I have more?
You two can have a little management accounting corner. No. I see Jamie has put contact details of the AAT recruitment team. So if you any questions, and not just people who are considering studying AAT, you deal with queries from current students as well, don't you?
Yes, so we have our customer support team. I'll pop the details in there in a moment. So yeah, if you're a current student, then they're there to help with all inquiries
Lovely. Well, I think we're nearly about there. Has anyone got any other questions or queries whilst everyone's on? It's Sarah having a rant. Yeah.
I think, you know, that there is a huge amount of support out there for, you know, anyone putting themselves through the challenge of the AAT exams, and then potentially even further forward. I mean, AAT is becoming a more and more common route to other qualifications like ACCA, CIMA, ICAEW, you know, just prolongs the fun for further years. But whilst there's lots of support and there's forums, and, you know, you may have colleagues, you may have friends, you know, you've still got to ultimately take that personal responsibility that ultimately you need to understand why you want that qualification and what it's going to do for your career and your life. So I think you've always got to have that in your mind as to, you know, all the support network in the world will be useless if you don't really know why you're trying to do it. So having a very clear picture, you know, I've known students who've actually created sort of mood boards, you know, literally they've cut out pictures of the kind of house they'd like to own when they qualify, the kind of car they'd like to drive, the kind of, you know, the life they want to lead as a result of having the AAT qualification. So I think it's important to have that clear vision in your head of where it's going to take you, because that's ultimately where I think all the motivation will then come from, and other people can support that and hold you accountable, but you've got to understand why you want to do it and what it's going to do for you.
Yeah, I think that's really important to focus on. People don't start AAT level 4 because they want to have a real in-depth knowledge of financial reporting standards. They do that because they want to get the very real benefits of AAT, be that either a promotion, a pay rise, you know, work for yourself, further exemptions from further studies. And there are so many people out there who can say, hand on heart, my life is better because I did AAT. And that's what you should focus on. There's so many great AAT do loads of case studies and examples, don't they, Jamie, of people who's like, look at me, this is what AAT can do.
Yes, yeah, we've got AAT stories from people from a range of different backgrounds, definitely. So if you have a look on our website, and they're brilliant, actually. And one thing I was going to say, actually, from a personal perspective when I was studying, is not to put too much pressure on yourself and not to overstudy. One thing I would do is I'd put aside a day, for example, to study, and then I'd feel like I need to be studying for that, say, 6-7 hours, and it would get to a point where it's kind of counterproductive, where it's no longer sinking in. So from a personal point of view, I kind of chopped it up a little bit and did it little and often, but it's not kind of beating yourself up if you haven't taken that whole day to study, and just giving yourself kind of a pat on the back that you've even taken the step to study and to do a new course. But yeah, not overstudying was probably one of my worst downfalls.
It's a great point, Jamie. Actually, I saw literally, I think this morning, or it might have been yesterday evening, on Hans group, there was somebody posted something that said something like, oh, I was planning to do loads of study this weekend and I've only done 2 hours on each of Saturday and Sunday. And I thought, that's not bad. 4 hours study in a weekend when the weather's like this, that's pretty good going. I didn't know why that student was beating themselves up so much when that's not bad at all.
It's better than nothing, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us up to the end of this session. So thank you for sort of chairing that little panel discussion, Nick, and thank you so much to both Jamie and Han for contributing. I think that's been a great discussion, lots of different ideas coming out of that. Thank you everyone for attending. We have recorded this session, so I will be sending out a copy of the recording to everyone who's registered so that you can look back at any of it you want to re-watch. But I hope that has been useful, and I hope that's been a nice start to our lunchtime sessions that will be running through the rest of this week. I do hope we'll see a lot of you over the coming days on other sessions that we're going to be running. I know Nick's doing some technical stuff this evening, aren't you, Nick? I think you've got advanced bookkeeping of you coming up this evening for a revision session. But thank you very much for attending. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you soon over the course of the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Han.
Bye.
Bye.